Hey guys, what's up? We're back with some more WarFrame action. Today we're gonna be looking at mag again. I know. I talk about mag like every other day. I know. But just, okay. There's a lot to talk about with mag. There's actually a lot of thinking that is involved when playing mag and building mag and everything to do with mag. This is why she's the 5000 IQ WarFrame. Anyway, let's get into it. So, one of the things I've been hearing about a lot is, hey, why don't you just use Corrosive Projection on your build? Like, just use it. It's so much better. It's the most overpowered aura in the game. It's better than all of them. Just use it. Why won't you use it? Just use it. Anyway, you know what I mean. So, let's have a look at why. But first off, what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate something. I'm not using Corrosive Projection on this build. As you see there, growing power has been procced, which means now I do 2 fracturing crushes. That's just to keep them all together. And now I've deleted all of their armor. Cool. These are level 130 corrupted heavy gunners. They have a lot of armor. And I've gotten rid of all of them. Granted, I've used a lot of energy. You can argue that that was not particularly good, but that's okay. That's irrelevant to the conversation. I've managed to get rid of all of their armor. Awesome. Let's have a look at how that works. Alrighty folks, so before we continue, I'm going to give you a fair warning. This video is going to involve quite a bit of math. If you don't like math, or if that, for whatever reason, confuses you, unfortunately this is not going to be the video for you. Or at least this section. We will go into a bit of a practical application later, but we're going to get into some math here. So, good luck. Let's get into it. So, here we have a build, okay? Now, this build has 159% power strength, and it uses Fracturing Crush, okay? Cool. 159% power strength, generally speaking, not that relevant, actually. I only bring it up just to remind myself. But, if growing power doesn't happen, right? If growing power doesn't happen, then Fracturing Crush takes out 78% of a target's armor, right? But since we had growing power happen, it takes out 80% of a target's armor. Now you may be wondering, no, that's not how the that's not how the math works. But unfortunately, there is a cap on how much armor Fracturing Crush can delete per cast. And I do say per cast, because every cast of Fracturing Crush stacks on top of each other multiplicatively. So what does that mean? Well, if we look at the diagram, the little animation that I hopefully remember to do, the first Fracturing Crush will delete 78% of a target's armor. Or, if growing power happened, and we're actually going to continue with growing power being in effect here, with growing power, Fracturing Crush will delete 80% of a target's armor. Cool! That means that there's only 20% of that armor left. Now, when we use Fracturing Crush again, it deletes a further 80% of the remaining 20%, which comes out to 16% of that armor. So when you use 2 Fracturing Crushes on top of each other with more than 160% power strength, effectively, you are taking out 96% of a target's armor. And that's with 2 of them. It is a lot of energy, I know, but whatever. And then, so long as the remaining 4% of the target's armor is less than whatever Polarized does, with my build it does 636 before growing power, so long as that amount of armor, so long as Polarized takes out more than what remains, obviously, that means that that target no longer has any armor. There's an added benefit with mag having Polarized, as opposed to, say, Ash with Seeking Shuriken or Banshee with Sonic Fracture. There is an added bonus where if you successfully remove all of their armor, then the duration that Fracturing Crush has to decreasing their armor becomes irrelevant, because when it tries to restore the armor, it can only restore based on the percentage of what the target has. Does that make any sense? So for example, if you just take out 80% of a target's armor, then they only have a fifth of it left, and then after the duration, you multiply what they have by 5. But if you happen to take out 20% of their 80% of their armor, and then take out the other 20% with polarized, for example, then they have no armor. Then after the duration, 0 times 5, and we're gonna have to really think about it here, but 0 times 5 happens to be 0. So they remain with no armor, right? Cool. So that's one of the things that you can think about with Mag. This is probably why I like her as an armor stripper more than, say, Banshee, Trinity, Ash. But not Oberon. Oberon has a similar idea as well. Except Oberon's doesn't actually have a duration, so his is a little bit more easier to understand. Cool. Alrighty folks, it's time for a practical example about why we wouldn't use Corrosive Projection over Growing Power. Okay, so with my build, it actually doesn't matter. Both of them are essentially irrelevant in terms of picking and choosing. So I've just gotten rid of the power drift because we're going to go for a very accessible demonstration. And our accessible demonstration revolves around using Just Intensify. So where are you? Just Intensify. Same build, same everything, but we're going to have Intensify instead of Umbral Intensify because, like I said, having Umbral Intensify and actually having like power drift together with my build, it's overkill in terms of anything else in the comparison. So we're just gonna have we're just gonna have regular Intensify. So obviously with regular Intensify, when growing power happens, we have 155% power strength, which means Polarized takes out more armor, Fracturing Crush takes out a higher percentage of that armor. Cool, awesome. Let's get into it. So we're going to be fighting the same enemies. They're level 135 as 35, level 130 as always. Same idea. First crush, second crush. Now get ready, because here comes the third crush, and suddenly all of their armor is missing. And then all of the same rules apply as before. We could just sit there and wait for the duration to expire, and even then they'll still have no armor. Or we could just kill them all, in much the same way that we did. Awesome, cool. But what happens if we decide to go with Corrosive Projection? Now remember, the default explanation is that Corrosive Projection is always better. But is it? What you are about to see will surprise you, but it won't, because I've been hinting at it for the past, how long are we now, 5 minutes? So same idea, first crush, second crush, let's bring these guys in together, and boom. They still have all of their armor left, like, there we go. I believe I have provided ample enough explanation as to why I don't bother with Corrosive Projection versus Growing Power. Or even why I don't even bother with Corrosive Projection versus Fracturing Crush. Because it's just hilariously unnecessary. See how much of a struggle it was compared to before, when I could just strip all of their armor? Okay guys, now you may be wondering, hey, how come that didn't happen? How come Corrosive Projection underperformed versus Growing Power? Well, let's bring up the chart. I actually had to do a table in Excel just to be sure that I wasn't seeing anything like was a bit weird. Okay, so here's our table. So a Corrupted Heavy Gunner has 11,696 point a little bit armor, but let's just keep things a little bit more simple. He says, bringing up an Excel spreadsheet. Let's just keep things a little bit simple and go for 11,696 armor. Cool. So we had our two different builds, the first one being the 135% power strength, the Corrosive Projection build, and the other one being the 135% power strength and Growing Power build. It was actually 130%, but whatever, let's not screw around here. When I did the calculations initially, I went for 135%, but as you can see, same results, whatever, it's the same idea. So, when you have 135% power strength corrosive projection build, after corrosive projection, the armor goes down to about 8,000. Cool. That's how that works. It's a 30% drop. And I did all of these calculations via macros on Excel, so they're all correct. All right. So the first crush is 67.5% reduction because you only have 135% power strength. 135% of 50% is 67.5%. If you need to verify that, grab a calculator and do the calculation. But that's what it is, 67.5% reduction. So that means that you basically take 67.5% of 8,000 away, and what do you have? You have 2,660 left. Cool. After the second crush, you do the same idea. You take away 67.5% of 2,660, you get 864. Now, you have to use polarize. At 135% power strength, that's 135% of 400, which comes out to 540. So you take away 540 armor, you only end up with 324 armor. Whereas, with growing power, after the first crush, which is already 80% reduction, or in this case it was like 74-ish, 72, 70% possibly, I don't remember. Actually, it is 70% reduction. But either way, when you have 80% reduction in armor, you are removing 80% of 11,000. So obviously it's going to end up being 2,300 or 2,340. Cool. And then after the second crush, you remove another 80%. So you're essentially dividing by 5, right? So obviously it goes down to 467. When you have 160% power strength, or in our demonstration 155% power strength, you have more. Your polarize takes away more armor than 467, which is why I was able to strip away all of that armor with a 135, well in this case 130% power strength plus growing power build, as opposed to the 135% power strength plus corrosive projection build. That top section alone is enough of a reason as to why I don't bother using corrosive projection with mag. You can have a look at the bottom section as well. There's some interesting math when you deal with level 165 corrupted heavy gunners. That's where the 17,900 armor comes from. It's actually 17,900 and a little bit, but whatever. And as you can see, with a 160% power strength build, it doesn't matter which aura you choose. The only time where it will matter is when you start to see enemies that happen to have more than 90 some odd thousand armor. I have absolutely no idea what level that is. It's definitely not 165. It could actually be 170 for 90,000. It could be 100. It could be level 80. I don't know. I haven't done the armor scaling math to figure that out, because there's actually quite a different kind of math, and I'm just not in the mood to figure that out. But as you can see, at some point, yes, corrosive projection will end up being better than growing power. But you're talking about enemies with 92,000 armor. You're talking about enemies with 114,000 armor. Because that's the maximum amount of armor that you can strip with a 160% power strength plus corrosive projection build if you're using 3 crushes. Right? If you're using 3 crushes. And using 3 crushes reduces all of their armor down to 0.56%. Right? Versus 0.8%. If you're able to somehow see that is enough of a difference that you have to be like, dude, just use corrosive projection, it's so much better, I can't. There's no point talking to you at this point. There's no point in like continuing a discussion. But yes, by definition, at some point, corrosive projection with a maximum build will eventually outpace growing power. But by then, like, what do you want me to do? Anyway, let me know what you think about this in the comments below. If for whatever reason you have any objections to anything that I have said, feel free to let me know in the comments. Because I haven't even gotten into augmented armor sorties. Augmented armor sorties alone completely decimates the standing of Corrosive Projection, because it actually halves the strength of Corrosive Projection. Even with a full team, you're only getting rid of 60% of their armor, whereas it doesn't affect Fracturing Crush. It does not affect Banshee's Sonic Fracture, or Ash's Seeking Shuriken, or Trinity's Link Augment, which I can't quite remember at this particular point in time. Those things don't get affected, but Corrosive Projection does. This is why I don't use it. So yeah, if you have any doubts, go ahead, do the calculations, see if you can figure it out. I used Excel, so everything sort of naturally fitted itself. Cool. Alright, hope you guys enjoy this lesson. If you did, hit the like button. If you really enjoyed it, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.